do a little. There we go. Howdy, friends and neighbors. It's your old buddy, Dr. Mark Jesinoski. Being real spontaneous this morning. Sitting on the couch enjoying my coffee, and I thought, you know what? It's time to check in. Time to say hello. I kind of want to get back to the basics this morning. Back to the basics. Sometimes we wander down some pathways and it gets a little windy. I find this process interesting of sharing my voice in this way, and I'm learning a lot from it. For anyone that continues listening, I really appreciate you sharing this journey and sharing this space, and I would love to hear your thoughts, your feelings, your perception, your stories, whatever that may be. You can email me at drmarkjesinoski@gmail.com. I should probably shorten that. It's drmarkjesinoski@gmail.com. So back to the basics for me is back to the breath. I notice when I strip away all the psychobabble, when I strip away all the books and all the articles and all the theories and all the ideas and more or less everything that is language based from my history, whether I'm navigating a particularly complex relationship scenario, whether I'm navigating the socio-political times we find ourselves living in, and I'm being fed or I'm consuming the information coming in through our many sources of media, whether I'm experiencing information from someone in my presence, someone I'm sitting with, someone I'm sharing space with. What I notice is my body is like an instrument that is designed to collect data. That data is automatically observed by this part of me called my limbic brain. And that's just a term that's used to describe a really complex set of brain structures that seem to work together to automatically respond to the present moment based on previous learning, based on previous memory. Our body communicates with our brain, and our brain communicates with our body. This all happens automatically. You don't get much of a choice in much of the processes of your brain and body. Now that's quite debatable because those who are well practiced are able to regulate their body quite a lot. Like you've probably by now, maybe if you haven't, you've perhaps heard of Wim Hof, Wimhoff, I believe. So he's a dude that has become very, very popular for his yoga breathing techniques and really managing the temperature of his body and his immune system, and more or less understanding how his body works automatically and how he can manage the systems of his body through his breath work by clearing his mind, by recognizing that the body is working automatically based on past experience. Wim Hof, I don't know, a lot of people may not know, but he tragically lost his wife. He was left with his children. I think he had 4 children or something, but he went through a traumatic experience. Like a lot of people, Experiences that are particularly traumatic in our own lives tend to lead us down a path of self-discovery. What I notice as a psychologist, as a shrink, as a wizard, as the combat veterans call us, the infantry Marines call us, or what I notice as just a dude that is been incredibly curious about my own experience in life is that, and I've been curious about this for years, it became clearer and clearer as I grew up and as I grew into my own life and as I observed many hundreds or probably thousands at this point of people who wanted to change but didn't know how to change, felt stuck, felt so stuck in their own thoughts and their own stories and their own traumas and their own histories. What I notice is some people go through really painful shit and they take the path of avoidance or resistance. Some people put labels on it like evil or dark or bad. But really, I think it's a form of self-absorption and resistance. Some people use the word narcissism. But I think it's resistance. It's the world, the perception is the world has hurt me, someone has hurt me, or something has hurt me, or the world is a hurtful place. And in order to protect myself, I need to build a wall around my core self, around my true self, so no one can touch me, no one can ever hurt me. And anything that hurts, anything that stings, including the feedback of others that is in response to my own behavior, I will deflect. We use terms like projection for this. Rather than taking responsibility, which takes tolerating your own emotions, which takes accepting your own shame, which takes looking within and observing the self, rather than taking full responsibility, some people that go through real deep trauma do the complete opposite of self-reflection. It's all projected outward. It's all pushed outward. And then there's a lot of people, and these are the people that become my clients, because the people that tend to resist change, people that tend to project excessively, people that tend to be obdurate or resistant to self-reflection, they push it outward because a lot of times people in those positions grew up with someone that was highly critical, highly judgmental of emotions and sensations and experiences, and children that grow up with highly judgmental, resistant, toxic parents sometimes develop the same response. Sometimes they develop the opposite response. The point I'm navigating here is I've been very curious for so long, and it's such a place of curiosity for me for so many different reasons. Some people choose the path of resistance. Other people choose the path, however stumbling, of opening up and becoming more self-reflective, taking a look in the mirror, noticing the thoughts, noticing the sensations, noticing the feelings, noticing the stories we tell. Those are the people that tend to seek out help. And of course, it's on a spectrum. I have been very resistant in my life at times, sometimes just being young, sometimes being adolescent finds you, a certain amount of narcissism is like a cocoon for a while. It keeps us safe. It keeps us believing that we can actually accomplish stuff that seems impossible. Like me deciding I wanted to be an artist when I was 20 years old, working at a coal mine in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And I picked up a brush because I didn't have a language for what I was experiencing. I didn't have the words to describe the profound aloneness that I felt, the profound isolation I was experiencing, the profound sadness I was experiencing. And so going from doing drawings and doodles to painting was just something that I naturally did as a way to cope. It was something that has been one of the greatest journeys of my life, is having this place that I can go to self-reflect, to look within, to project onto the canvas, to make sense of things that I don't have a language for. But circling back, it's fascinating to me and concerning to me, and I'm curious about why certain people choose the path of resistance and why other people choose the path of openness. There seems to be a very strong genetic component for it, but when I observe a lot of children through the counseling work that I do, or observe children in the community, observe people in my own circle, what you notice is people that tend to develop the more resistant, and there's a certain someone that has been in, put in a place of high power in our country for a long time that behaves this way. I suspect this person was relentlessly invalidated as a child to the point where empathy was not allowed, to the point where feelings and emotions and needs were not necessarily allowed. And what you notice is people that become, and I've actually become very averse to the term narcissistic, because it's a term, and it pigeonholes people. It restricts people from being who they truly are. What I notice is people that do tend to take that more extreme path were probably relentlessly overwhelmed with critical feedback, whether physical, emotional, or intellectual forms of abuse as children, and there was no escape. There was no escape from the relentless barrage of criticism, because they had an adult figure or adult figures in their life, or even a culture around them, that constantly told them they were not good enough, constantly made them feel like nothing they did was good enough. And perhaps those individuals, those adult figures, were projecting their sense of deep inferiority and inadequacy on those children. And when there's no escape, what do? You bury your true self beneath fantasies and delusions, and you warp your reality around yourself, because you can't possibly come to terms with the fact that the person who is supposed to love you the most, who is supposed to be your protector, who is supposed to serve you in some ways, your parent figure that's supposed to be compassionate, never allows you to come up for air long enough to really fill your lungs fully before you're pushed back down beneath the surface in your suffering as a child. So what I've observed is those people are the ones that seem to develop a very resistant tendency to resist feedback, to resist insight, to resist looking in the mirror, to resist taking responsibility. What I notice is that you can put other people through similar experiences, and for whatever reason, probably an interaction of genetics and having other people in their environment that rescue them, other people in their environment that show them the way out. And when a child sees the path of love and the path of compassion and the path of acceptance, and they're living in the context of overwhelming projection, overwhelming enmeshment, overwhelming enmeshment, like a lack of boundaries, like the adult just consuming the child to almost make the child what the adult wants the child to be. And well, I don't want to go down that pathway right now. And what I notice is that when someone is shown the pathway out of that hypercriticism, the true self is able to be expressed. It's able to grow. It's able to be nurtured. They seek out connections with people who are empathic. For a lot of people, I would say most people, sometimes people don't get to do that self-reflection. They don't get to do that learning and that growing until they're adults, until they're away from the environment that they grew up in, till they're away from that toxic feedback, till the path that they found to get out of that led them to a place where they're safe enough, where they no longer have to utilize the coping strategies that kept them safe from their abusive adult or adults around them or culture that's around them. And once people get away from that, they start to feel that dissonance. They start to recognize that the perceptions and the tendencies and the mediums that they use to perceive themselves in the context of their reality may not be working so well anymore. In fact, they may be causing trouble in relationships. They may be causing problems. The very thing that they did to protect themselves as children has become a problem now as an adult, because the way that we are coping with our adult relationships finds us recreating those childhood dynamics. So if we had that overbearing parent, for example, we just naturally expect anyone in our life who is an authority figure or has a loud mouth or is in a position of power in our life, our body and our brain automatically perceive that incoming information as a source of threat, and our brain and body do what they did as children. They just naturally protect us. And people that are willing to slow down enough to pay attention to how the body and the mind are responding, to slow down enough to recognize that the automatic tendencies of the body and the mind may not be correct anymore. They may not be necessary anymore. They may not be a very good way to cope anymore because they're causing problems. Those individuals start to slow things down and start to notice the automatic tendencies and start to recognize that there's actually space for change. There's space for new behavior. There's space for, if I can slow down enough to tolerate the automatic pulse in my body of fear, or the automatic pulse of anxiety, or the automatic pulse of anger, if I can slow down enough to observe the automatic story that's popping up in my head, now I can recognize there's a different way to respond. I can slow down and take responsibility. I can slow down and consider behaving from a place of value as opposed to automatic process. So getting back to the basics of where I started, and I've mentioned this many times in the past in this podcast, but I realize over time that new people may be listening, or it may be good to have ourselves a little refresher. Sometimes it's good just to talk in circles because repetition allows us to learn. I know for me, I've been a very trial and error learner in my life. Anyone that's known me long enough know that I like to beat my head against the wall a few times before I learn something. I'm a very experiential learner. And in fact, a lot of the things that I practice in my life today, I have dabbled in gathering information from multiple sources over the course of my life, but a lot of it comes from practice. A lot of it comes from self-reflection. A lot of it comes from paying very deliberate attention to my breath for the past about 20 years. The first time I became aware of that process was because I read a line by a man named Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese monk. And he essentially said, if you can pay attention to your breath, you can pay attention to the moment. If you can pay attention to the moment, then everything will take care of itself. And in paying attention to this moment, I notice how quickly my mind, my brain, my thoughts want to jump ahead to certain ideas, want to go down certain pathways that may or may not be helpful. And I use the breath to slow that down. I use the breath to sit here and notice that my mind has multiple thoughts that might want to take me in multiple directions, and that my body has certain sensations, and that I could easily respond to those sensations. And suddenly I'm not behaving how I want to behave anymore. I'm not creating how I want to create anymore. I'm just creating based on expectation of what the present moment should be like. So all of us have learned automatically from our life experience. Our brain and body are designed to learn automatically from experience, whether we like it or not. And we have this amazing ability to consider what we call the past, which is an illusion, and we consider the future, which is an illusion. It's an illusion of thought or the mind. And the mind in and of itself is a bit of an illusion because it's a collection of billions and billions of constructed perceptions based on this thing that we call memory. So we're carrying around a lot of learning, a lot of memory in our mind and body, possibly generational memory, possibly memories that were passed on to us. We call it generational trauma. So in the present moment, our brain and body is picking up on information from the internal world of your mind and your body, and also picking up on information from the external world. Our brain and body is doing this automatically. And if we're not practicing, our brain and body will respond to this present moment through the lens of your memory. It's memory in your body, it's memory in your brain. Suffice it to say, we're responding to this present moment through the lens of memory. So most of us are not responding to the present moment correctly, you could say. We're responding to the present moment through everything that we have ever become attached to. What's phenomenally amazing, and also a problem of this limbic system, this limbic brain, this automatic brain that keeps us, designed to keep us safe, is that it responds automatically to the present moment through the lens of memory. The hippocampus, where we think long-term memories are formed or stored, although that's debatable, but you know, the hippocampus is part of this limbic system, and so is the amygdala. What's the amygdala? It's like sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's this automatic thing that responds to keep us safe in the moment. So when that system responds automatically to the present moment through the lens of memory, suddenly we are literally creating our perception of the present moment based upon how other people are responding to our own automatic behaviors. The problem is most of us are not aware of our automatic behaviors enough to realize that we are actually creating a good proportion of what we actually experience. So we end up blaming the external world for what we are actually creating in the present moment through the lens of memory and expectation and behavior. What's fascinating is the body learns, the body has memory, the muscles have memory. A lot of people call them somatic memories. There's a book called The Body Keeps a Score by a dude named Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the leading researchers and practitioners in the area of complex trauma or post-traumatic stress. And he really revolutionized the way people think of trauma in the modern era in the United States, and understanding that the body does keep the score, meaning the body has memory, and the body will respond automatically to the present moment. So when you feel that automatic anxiety, that automatic heart palpitation, when you feel that automatic tendency for your body to be angry or fearful or worried or anxious, a lot of combat veterans have that experience of the body automatically responding from a place of intensity, fear, anger. That was what kept you safe out in the field, so to speak. It's just the body doing what it did to keep you safe. The body communicates with the brain apparently more than the brain communicates with the body. And I'm just saying that based on things that I've heard and read in it. But also a lot of it is based on my own experience of spending a lot of time just paying attention to the phenomenon of my own body and mind. So essentially the body will tell the brain what's going on. And the brain will be like, okay, I believe it. And then we'll respond accordingly. And that triggers our thoughts, and that triggers our stories, and that triggers our perceptions. And we say, oh, I know what's going on here. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's their fault. Someone has wronged me. Someone has hurt me. Someone is out to get me. I'm under threat. I better respond in some way to keep myself safe. Likewise, that limbic brain, or let's just say the memory in your brain, is seeing the world through the lens of that memory. So if your mind is ruminating, if you find your attention is in a place of fear, your attention is, you're thinking thoughts and you're telling stories in your mind about what a shitty world you live in, or how bad 2020 was, or how crazy the government is, or how crazy Republicans are, or how crazy Democrats are, or how crazy whatever. The stories in your mind, the attention that you place your mind into, wherever you put your attention, your emotional brain will believe it's real. Let's say it that way. Wherever you put your attention, your emotional brain is not designed to distinguish between reality and fantasy, because that takes time. It takes time to say, is this real or not? I'm not sure. Is this real or not? That's why we freak out in dreams. That's why you can have dreams and your emotional brain and your body can respond to the dream or nightmare as if it's real. It's nothing more than this beautifully complex brain is in a place of telling a story to itself, and your emotional brain is like, shit, we're back in the war. Oh no, we're back in this abusive situation. Oh no, someone's chasing me. So you can create fear, and you can create anxiety, and you can create sadness and anger just by putting your attention in a place of threat, in a place of suspicion, in a place of paranoia, in a place of blame, in a place of perceiving yourself as the victim to the world around you. And you can also experience fight or flight or anxiety or sadness or fear or whatever just by perceiving the sensations in your body. If you hold your body in a tense position, you can make yourself feel kind of anxious. But if you loosen your body, I work all the time, a lot of other people, this is something people do with combat veterans, we do with a lot of people with trauma. You teach people how to loosen the body up. You teach people how to shake the shoulders and loosen the body and shake the body, and you can really move the energy in your body. You can shake those memories up. You can shake that tension up. What's amazing is when you do that, even right now, just moving my shoulders and moving my arms and shaking my hands and opening up my belly tells my brain that I'm actually safe. In fact, that I'm so safe that I'm moving around and I'm loose. And by being that way, your body says, oh, I guess we're at peace. And your brain says, oh, I guess we're safe. But then what happens? The mind says, no, we're not safe. Remember, someone hurt us. Remember, people are out to get us. Remember, they're out to get us. So as soon as your brain engages in that, your emotional brain says, oh shit, I guess we are under threat. And then it tells the body to be anxious, and then the body starts feeling anxious. And then the brain perceives the body, and the brain says, oh shit, our body's under tension. I guess we are under threat. And it becomes this cycle. It becomes a cycle. So how do you intervene in that cycle? How do you get through that? How do you learn to not act out your fear? How do you learn to not act out the anger or the anxiety within your body or that frantic story in your mind? How do you intervene? There's many different ways to intervene, but you can kind of make it simple. If you think of our nervous system, the way our brain and body works, most of it is automatic. Most of the nervous system, most of the systems of the body, circulatory system, endocrine system, all of it, it's all working beautifully automatically, but like I said, it's programmed by history. It's programmed by experience. The body in and of itself and the brain is a relatively neutral system, with the exception of course, we have DNA, we have genetic expression, we have generational trauma, we have things that are passed on to us. But the brain and body are relatively neutral, meaning you can practice being a certain way and your brain and body will follow over time. So a good proportion of, or I should say a part of our brain and body, we have voluntary movement. We can say, I'm going to move my body this way. I'm going to slow down and listen to my breath. I'm going to notice that my mind is in a certain place. I'm going to notice I'm telling myself a certain story. And rather than thinking that thought, rather than being lost in that thought, rather than getting wrapped up in a narrative about what a victim I am, I'm going to say, I'm noticing I'm having a thought. I notice my mind is having a thought. I am not my mind. I am not that thought. It's just a narrative in my head because that's what my brain is made to do. So we can voluntarily intervene by utilizing our consciousness, our conscious ability to say, instead of my automatically moving my body in a defensive manner, instead of automatically moving my body in an aggressive manner, instead of putting my mind in an attention of fear or an attention of aggression or an attention of someone's out to get me, I'm going to voluntarily decide that everything I'm experiencing in this present moment is a source of information. It's a source of data that somehow I am in here observing my body. I am observing my mind. I am observing the sensations of the body. I'm observing the sensations of the mind that we call thoughts that become stories by wrapping language around experience. And the more I listen to my breath, the more I slow down the present moment, the more I notice the automatic tendency, the more I talk like I am right now, the more I can say, oh, I don't need to act out the sensation of my body. I don't need to act out the story in my mind. I don't need to keep telling that story. Through all the trials and tribulations of my daily life, and I'm not saying that to be dramatic, I'm just saying being alive, you're going to experience a certain amount of suffering. You're going to experience suffering as long as you are acting from a place of suffering, from a place of memory, from a place of attachment, from a place of automatic response. So through the trials and tribulations of my own experience, of my own life, And this has taken years and years of observation and practice and fucking up and starting over again and always giving myself permission to begin again, to start again, to wake up every day, hit the reset button and say, okay, starting over again. Rather than lashing, and of course I've had to learn and I'm practicing, and my experiences over the past few years have been one of the best forms of learning in my entire life. So rather than acting it all out in the present moment, rather than lashing out, which I do sometimes, rather than running away, which I do sometimes, rather than being aggressive, which I do sometimes, the goal is to sit back and say, okay, what do I notice in this moment? Rather than automatically acting out the pulse in your body, rather than automatically assuming the story you're telling yourself is correct, what's interesting is intellectual people actually have a harder time with this because they're so fused with their thoughts. They believe their thoughts are real. They believe their stories are real. They believe their theories are real. I'm smart, damn it. So I am correct. I am more correct than everyone else. But if you can sit back in the moment, and I've been doing this a lot lately, just sitting back and saying, okay, rather than what story am I telling myself, once I sit there and say, what story am I running here? What story am I telling myself? What am I responding to? What am I acting out? What am I projecting? If I can sit there and say, I notice I'm perceiving this thing we call the past, and I notice I'm perceiving this thing we call the future, and I notice I'm telling a story in my mind, and I notice my body is having a certain sensation. But if I can look at it all from a place of sensation, and I can just allow it to be what it is, I can allow the sensation of grief to bubble to the surface and express itself. That takes a lot of willingness because our brain perceives that grief as threat. We say, wait a second, we've kept it pushed down there all that time. We can't allow those sensations to rise to the surface because then we have to experience our loss. We can't let those sensations to rise to the surface because then we have to experience our shame. We don't want to experience our shame. So by getting rid of denial, by getting rid of avoidance, by getting rid of projection, by learning to sit with the sensation, observing it and allowing it in the present moment, opening up your belly, opening up your arms, opening up your body and saying, it's okay to feel this. It's okay for this sensation to rise to the surface. It's okay to feel my shame. It's okay to feel my grief. What's interesting is years and years and years of trauma start to bubble to the surface. It starts to become expressed. It is painful. It does hurt. It can be powerfully energetic, and it can be terrifying for a lot of people. But if you can stay with your breath, if you can say this is healing, if you can put your attention in a place of, I'm choosing to allow these emotions to come to the surface. I'm choosing to allow these tears to fall. I'm choosing to allow the expression of these emotions that I have locked away and denied and suppressed for so long out of survival. What's really cool is if you do that enough, eventually the body and the mind don't have anything else left to process, and you feel really calm in the moment. You feel much more at peace. People fuck with you, and you don't have a lot of fear in your body anymore. The world tells you to be afraid. The powerful entities out there that want you to buy their products or that want you to be afraid so they can keep you divided into Republicans and Democrats and whites and blacks and whatever, Vikings fans and Cowboys fans, and obviously Vikings are way better, but you know what I'm saying. If we can just notice the sensation of it in the moment, we can allow all the memory that we're carrying around in our body and our brain to become processed once and for all, and then we can find much more stillness in the present moment. Believe it or not, you can actually achieve a very quiet mind. You can actually achieve a very peaceful body. And what's amazing is when you get into that place, you can start to really practice and hone your ability to perceive the way that you were meant to perceive. Your body is a profoundly fine-tuned instrument. You start to perceive others in a way you never knew you could. You start to feel others in a way you never knew you could. Your empathic ability dramatically increases. Your ability to be empathic emotionally, intellectually, physically dramatically increases because you're no longer perceiving the present moment through the lens of your memory or the illusion of the past. You're perceiving the present moment for what it is. It's a sensation in the body in this present moment. And sometimes those sensations are not actually yours. You are picking up on the emotional resonance, the energetic resonance of someone else around you. It's not magical. It's not anything more than you are made to perceive way more than you believe you are. The world has taught you that you're not as smart as you are. You're not as gifted you are. The world needs you to be a really great consumer. The world needs you to need to be entertained. The world needs you to need to be distracted. The world needs you to be afraid. The world needs you to blame someone else. To sustain itself. This machine that we have co-created through trauma, by acting out our generational trauma, this machine that we've created by consuming and perceiving that we need to consume all the time, it's just a thing that we've created and co-created by acting out together. Now, I don't just believe, I perceive very clearly that there are people out there, there are entities out there, which I've talked about in the past, that recognize how easily you can manipulate people, how easily you can manipulate the human body and the human mind through fear, through rhetoric. Just look it out there. Just pay attention. Just get rid of your label for a moment. Get rid of your Republican and Democrat label. Get rid of the tribe that you have attached yourself to, and just step back and notice, what are the messages that I'm receiving? What is the intention of these messages? How come every time I turn the news on, it's fear, 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 fear? Be afraid. Be afraid. Someone is out to get you. Keeps us weak, keeps us divided, keeps us as good fuel for the machine that has been created. How do you step outside of all of this shit? Your trauma, your generational trauma, your anxiety, your fear. How do you not make yourself a pawn in this game, in this system? You slow down and listen to your breath. You notice the sensations of your body, and you're willing to sit in stillness, even if it's uncomfortable, and allow those sensations to bubble to the surface, and recognize you don't need to become your anger. You don't need to become your anxiety. You don't need to become your fear. You don't need to act out the story you're telling yourself in your mind, no matter how real you think it is, no matter how justified you think you are. There's Lucy. We'll take that as a signal to be done. So circling back to how do we intervene? Well, we can do a lot of things by voluntarily choosing to. We can move our body, our physical body, in a way that is loose and opening up and nurturing and empowering. That's why yoga becomes such a good instrument. There's a reason why it's a thousands-year-old thing that helps to move energy and helps to strengthen the body and helps to bring the body into alignment so it can be the great instrument that it is. There's a reason why meditation allows you to let go of your thoughts and your stories and the automatic tendencies of your mind and helps you realize the illusion of what has been created over time. And you can slow down and you can choose. If I wasn't feeling this way, if I wasn't thinking this way, if I wasn't telling this story, what would I actually do in this present moment according to my values? What would I create if I could create it? What would I create in this present moment if I was choosing to do so? Every single one of you is capable of doing that. I think we've been deluded for thousands of years into believing we needed a powerful leader or a priest or some authority figure to tell you how to think, to tell you how to feel, to tell you who you are, to tell you how to believe. No, you don't. Everything you need to know is inside of you if you're willing to allow it. But it takes surrender. I didn't go into surrender until the person I loved most, until what I thought was the most important part of my life started to fall apart, until I had to let go of that person that was the most important person in my life other than my children. I didn't surrender until I had to, until the momentum of my life put me in a position where running away wasn't an option, anger wasn't an option, denial wasn't an option, fear wasn't an option, being a victim wasn't an option, suicide wasn't an option, running away was not an option. Sitting in it, noticing the pain, noticing the sadness, noticing the stories I'm telling myself, noticing the sensations of the body, allowing it all to bubble to the surface, and recognizing that every single thing that I experience is a sensation in this present moment. And I can handle that. And not only can I handle that, but I can start to create from that place. I can create, rather than creating from a place of automaticity, rather than creating from a place of fear, rather than creating from that place of anger, I can create, I can choose to put my attention into love. I can choose to become love. And as a dear friend sent me the other day, a quote from a fella named Ram Dass. When I am in love and you are in love, then we are in love together. And that is what we call oneness. We are not so separated, friends and neighbors. We are not so different. If we choose to put our attention into love, and we can be one in love, you don't need to think all those thoughts. You don't need to think, how am I going to change this? How am I going to fix this? How am I going to change that person? How am I going to fix that person? How am I going to force someone to think the way I think? Because the way I think is right and everyone else is wrong and I'm better and smarter and righter. Bullshit. People on the left do it. People on the right do it. Take a look in the mirror. Slow down. Recognize you are creating in the present moment. You're creating from a place of momentum. How would you create in the present moment if you truly exercised your choice to do so? What I believe true Christianity is, and maybe you prickle as I say that, but I'm okay with going there. I believe truly allowing Christ within. Christ said, I am the way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Lao Tzu in the book of the Tao Te Ching, which is the book of the way, talked about the way. The Tao, the way. Christ is the way. To me, what is that? It's surrendering my mind and my body to the one love, to the one energetic resonance that transcends my physical body and brings us all together. I surrender myself, I surrender my ego, I surrender my fear, I surrender my story, and I allow myself to become love. I'm still working on it. I believe salvation is a moment by moment, breath by breath practice. I don't believe you just say, I am saved now. I don't need to practice anymore. I don't need to do anything anymore. I am right. They are wrong. I'm a Christian. They're the sinner. I'm saved. They are not. Whatever your belief system is, I only talk about Christianity because that was my upbringing. That was my practice. That was my doctrine. I still continue to be curious and to learn and to try to grow in that by becoming more and more simple, more and more childlike, more and more surrender in the present moment to the way, to the love, to the Christ within, to allow the divine within to become you, and to recognize that you are far more than you have been told. And I sure wish and hope that you all have a wonderful Saturday. I sure love you. I sure appreciate you. And I sure appreciate getting to spend this time with you and share this space with you. And if you're still listening after 51 minutes and 29 seconds, then I am grateful. Have a great day, everybody. This is Dr. Mark Jesinoski. This is the Wizard Podcast, episode 39. Take care.